MZTV.
In our continued study of what Paul means by flesh in the first 8 chapters of Romans, I want to look into the life of King David, because King David is the opposite of King Saul. King Saul, remember, was chosen by Israel because they liked his stature, they liked his broad shoulders, they liked how handsome he was. David, as we know, was a mess. David was all over the place on the outside of the cup, but on the inside of the cup, he was a man after God's own heart. And there's a great lesson in studying a particular incident in the life of King David, and that's what I'm going to do today. This is Martin Zender. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Do you remember a couple weeks ago, I'm always telling you that I think life is too long, and these people who say life is too short, they just puzzle me. How well are things going for these people? They want more of it? It kind of reminds me of that Woody Allen joke at the beginning of Annie Hall. You remember Woody Allen's, the opening there is a soliloquy, I would call it. He quotes a joke about the 2 women at the club. The one woman says, "Such terrible food here." And the other woman says, "Yes, in such small portions." Same with life. It's such a hard thing. Death reigns, murder, mayhem. Yes, and it's all over far too quickly. No, I disagree. I think it's way too long. And I said that I wanted somebody to make me a t-shirt. And I wanted the t-shirt to say, "Life is too damn long." And in parentheses, I wanted it to say, "What's your problem?" Like, you must have a real problem if you want this to keep going. You want more of it. I want more of the era that crucified Jesus Christ. I want more evil. I want more death. I want more starvation. I want more war. Yes, gotta have more of it. Well, somebody did make me that t-shirt. I had faith that someone would step to the plate, and Elaine Kelly did that, and I'm wearing the shirt now. I'm going to show you this. Thanks to Elaine Kelly. Look at this. Here it is. Life is too damn long. What is your problem? What's your problem? There it is. Life is too damn long. What's your problem? I'm going to model this for you a little bit. Look at this. I'm going to show it to you from the back, too. Look at this. I love it. Thank you, Elaine. Made my day. And now I've made yours. Have you ever wondered how in the heck King David could have been called by God, and I'm quoting now, "a man after my own heart"? Acts 13:22. King David, wasn't this the husband of many wives who lusted after another man's wife and had her husband killed so that he could marry the object of his lust? That King David? Yes. Isn't this the guy who danced so hard in front of the Lord while they were bringing the Ark of the Covenant back from the Philistines that he made a fool of himself in front of the slave girls? Going to get into the juicy details of this. David's wife got really pissed off at him, and you're going to find out why she is a representation of Christians and why King David is a representation of those of faith. And his wife rebuked him. Ooh, that's a bad thing to do, to rebuke the one who is a man after God's own heart. Here's an account of the notable day, very notable day, in the life of the man God's heart throbbed for. Yes, I love it. Speaking of King David, this is from 2 Samuel, chapter 6, verse 20. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, M-I-C-H-A-L, could be Michal. I'm just going to call her Michal because that's the easiest thing for me. The daughter of Saul, isn't this interesting? The daughter of Saul. So this is the offspring of the man who was chosen not because he was a man after God's own heart, King Saul, but because he looked good on the outside. And Israel lusted to have a king like the other kings of the other nations. God wasn't good enough for them. So David was returning home to bless his household. Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today." This is satirical. She doesn't mean it. Going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants as any vulgar fellow would. You remember, David is dancing with all his might in front of the Lord, and he was wearing not much. And he was wearing, I believe, a linen ephod. And I always thought that the reason David humiliated himself, it says he exposed himself in front of the maidens. I thought that he was literal, like, you know, he showed his stuff a little bit. No, he exposed his simplicity. He exposed his commonness. He exposed the fact that he himself had no confidence in his flesh, and he had no confidence. He put no great stock in his royal attainments. This is just like Saul, who came to see himself. I'm talking about Saul, who became Paul, who came to consider all of his attainments in Judaism to be so much dung, and he gives them away. So David, even while he is king, he gives it away. He is not impressed with his own majesty, with his own royal attire. Now, here is a comment from the Pulpit Commentary, and I quote, "David's offense in the eyes of Michal was not his dancing, but his divesting himself," listen to this, his divesting himself of his royal robes and appearing before his subjects clad in the dress of an inferior class. The language of Michal is that of a woman vexed and irritated. After reminding David of his high office as king of Israel, she reproaches him for appearing on a grand public occasion without the upper and becoming robe in which an Oriental enwraps himself. And this he had done before the female slaves of his own servants, with no more self-respect than that shown by the vain fellows. This is so good, especially that part where Michal is vexed and irritated at her husband. I'm going to draw an analogy before I read another commentary on this event in David's life, is that those who are under the thumb of religious bondage, they will become so vexed and irritated by your freedom. They will be vexed and irritated that God could possibly bless common people, bless people who are dancing in the Spirit. And I'm not talking about Pentecostal dancing in the Spirit, to bless people who, like me, the other day, I'm doing my show, smoking a cigar and drinking a glass of whiskey. This is my equivalent of David dancing before the Lord in his common garb, not caring if he looks like a fool, not caring if he's divested of his royal vestiture, and not caring that anyone would see him as a common person. I want you to see me as a common person, because the last thing I want is for anybody to think of me as a standard issue Christian preacher, or a Christian at all, who habitually decorates the outside of the cup, makes everybody think that they're something. Isn't that what a lot of people do when they go to church, especially on Easter, right? They want to look their best, and they want to appear before others in accord with who they think they are before Christ. And the Pharisees were like this. They loved to parade in the streets. Saul, before he became Paul, was like this. Why do you think people put their diplomas on the wall? When a theologian has a diploma, he doesn't roll it up and hide it in his dresser drawer. No, he puts it on the wall because he wants everybody to know that I have attained to a certain stature. This is all outside of the cup, outside of the cup. And as I told you yesterday, Jesus Christ loves to look beyond the outside of the cup to the inside of the cup. And what he usually sees there, especially the people who go out of their way to be pretentious and to present a presentable front, usually finds pride, usually finds self-righteousness underneath. This is from Gill's exposition of the Bible. Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David before he had gotten to his own house and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today," which she spoke in an ironical, jeering way, meaning the reverse, how inglorious, mean, and despicable he had made himself to be by his airs and gestures. This is from the Jameson Fawcett Brown Bible Commentary, and I quote, "Proud of her royal extraction, Michal upbraided," oh, her royal extraction, yes, she was a descendant of Saul, the first king of Israel. Proud of her royal extraction, Michal upbraided her husband for lowering the dignity of the crown and acting more like a buffoon than a king. But her taunting sarcasm was repelled by David in a manner that could not be agreeable to her feelings. He hurt her feelings, while it indicated the warm piety and gratitude of David. It's the thankfulness of David for what God had wrought in his life. The reason David was a man after God's own heart is because David recognized constantly the source of his blessing. And the source of it was not the Royal Robe Company. It was not the Crown Company. It was not the vote of the people. No, nobody voted for David. This was not an election. God chose him through Samuel the prophet when he was just a lad. And because he was just a lad, and you might say had not done anything good or bad, God said, "This one I want," and it was complete, total choice of God based on God's desire, not on any worthiness of David. This is what happened next. Listen to what happened next. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 21. David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord." Love it. It was before the Lord who chose me. I danced before the Lord who chose me. He gets a dig in here. Listen to this. "Who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord." So yes, David gets a dig in there. He reminds his wife that God's choice does not necessarily, and usually doesn't, align with pedigree or with what the world would call propriety. Again, from the Pulpit Commentary, listen to this. "The preference of David over Saul was proof that Saul's affectation of royal estate," this is King Saul, he had affectations. Saul's affectation of royal state and his self-importance were not pleasing in God's eyes. It's the self-importance. It's a terrible, ugly thing that is not often caught because people are too taken with the outward trappings. Now, the reference to King Saul brings to our mind, it should, Saul of Tarsus, who, I don't know this for a fact, but I would say he was probably named after the king, and he was unquestionably, by his own admission, a Pharisee of the Pharisees. Yes, as he was as self-important in his own eyes as was the first king of the Jewish people, King Saul. King Saul, from his shoulder and upward, higher than any of the people. 1 Samuel 9:2. That's why Saul was chosen. From his shoulders and upward, higher than any other of the people. He had a physical. Israel's always looking at the outside, always looking at the outside of the cup. And today, the religious world, they're always still looking at the outside of the cup. And what is this an indication of except ability based on flesh? The ability based on flesh can apply to either physical or moral stature. I've been making the point that the flesh wants to attain moral stature. And as I've said over and over again, this is the most hidden of sins. It's the sin that most people justify, the sin that is most easily provoked. It's easily provoked, this self-justification, this how dare you be a commoner? how dare you, Martin Zender, smoke a cigar and drink whiskey? Don't you know that people of God don't do those things? So whenever you exercise any freedom of Christ, this, and especially, you know, if you tell people that you know the truth of Christ, as I do, I tell people, I know the truth. I don't know all truth, but I know truth. And they look at me and they look for the diploma on the wall. They look for me to act in a way that is consistent with your standard issue Christian preachers, the outside of the cup, outside of the cup. I'm not interested in any of that. In fact, I go out of my way to not beautify the outside of the cup, so that if anyone is attracted to my message, they're attracted by the message. They're not attracted by my professional studio. I'm sitting out here on a table outside. I'm not dressed in a three-piece suit. I'm not pulling up in my limo. I'm not flying in on my Gulfstream. That really provokes a reaction, as we saw from David's wife, Michal. In the eyes of God, however, God, I find, sees everything differently than we do. Self-aggrandizement, pride, self-righteousness is the most damaging of all sins, because it puts self-power and self-will above God's power and will. This is the darkest corner of human flesh. Name any crime. There are terrible crimes in the world, but this is the darkest one. This is what Paul is addressing in the first 8 chapters of Romans. I quote again from Gill's exposition of the Bible. David adds, speaking of God, who chose me before thy father and before all thy house. The comment goes on, which he said to humble her pride. David wanted to humble his wife's pride and mortify her, as well as to remark the distinguishing goodness of God to him, which laid him under obligation to express his thankfulness to God in every shape, to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel, which was a high honor conferred upon him, and required the utmost gratitude. And again, I've said this, that you cannot be thankful to God properly, and you cannot exercise thankfulness properly unless you come to a full understanding that everything you have is a gift of God. Otherwise, your thankfulness is just, it's false in a way. Any thankfulness that does not come from a thorough understanding of the uselessness of human flesh to please God is not going to be, it's not going to be sincere. It's going to be forced. It's going to be feigned. For instance, oh my God, people praying at meals. Lord, we come to you. Thank you for this food. Please bless it to our use. What is this? I hear this all the time. Bless this food to our use. It's a formula. These people aren't thankful. They feel they have to offer a word of thanks. Either do it right, like, oh my God, thank you for this food. Everything we have, it's of you. Lord, bless this food to our use. If I hear that stupid, rote prayer of, quote, Thanksgiving one more time, I'm going to start a food fight. I'd rather not say anything than to undergo a formal, prefabricated Hollywood wall prayer of Thanksgiving, which to me is evidence that, why should we really be thankful? Because when you get right down to it, we kind of made this happen. I mean, our faith, our willingness to serve God, yeah. The pride of the flesh always must be humbled and mortified, killed, destroyed. But the assumption of flesh that it can actually, or at least attempt to please God is powerful. Oh my God, the flesh, the assumption, I can please God. It's so powerful that it has to be destroyed by God. Paul says in Romans 8:8, now those who are in flesh are not able to please God. That seems pretty straightforward to me. It takes a megaton spiritual nuclear something to beat this out of people. This is what the tribulation is all about, my friends. The tribulation is about beating with a megaton explosion the self-righteousness out of the world. And this happens to individuals also. On a personal level, people's worlds are destroyed, and they have to be beaten down in order for them to come to a realization. Saul on the road to Damascus, God beat this man down with the manifestation of his glory and his power, blinded him. You might say that wasn't nice, but that's what it took. Look what it took. Look what it took. Now, the mysterious thing about this is we know that God could flick his finger at any time and bring anyone to the end of themselves when they finally realize that, oh, Jesus, my salvation is really not of me. I said it all those years that it was of God, but I didn't really understand it. Now I know. He could do that at any time. He could bring anybody to a Saul of Tarsus on the road to Damascus moment, but he doesn't do it for most people. Why? This is the shock. You ready for this? God prefers that the world consist chiefly of sectarian religious hypocrites. That's what God wants. He wants the world to be overwhelmed by sectarian religious hypocrites. Why? So that against this pathetic darkness, and the world is dark, he can display the light and grace of his chosen ones, and that's us. God sees to it that the light, the illumination, the irradiation of God, the light that leads to Aeonian life, as I talked to you about yesterday, rarely comes. God arranges it so that this light rarely comes. In fact, to help repel it, to keep the illumination at bay, it might be surprising to you to hear that God does this, but he does. He fans religious anger in the form of so many Michaels. There are so many Michaels out there who voice offense at the slightest whiff of anyone's freedom. In fact, freedom. Your freedom in Christ, my freedom to smoke a cigar or drink whiskey, or to not wear a three-piece suit, or to not be appearing behind a lectern. My freedom, when it's opposed and looked down at and mocked, it exposes the bondage of the people mocking me. Michael's criticism of her husband exposed her bondage. It was all about the outside to her. It was all about propriety. It was all about looking the part. Look the part of a king. These people who are like Michael, they live for appearance's sake. They live for self-respect, in fear of being made a fool. Nobody wants to look like a fool, in fear of what others will think of them. And they sure don't want the world. Oh God, everybody loves the opinion of the world. You don't want the world to think less of you. In this world, confidence in flesh, this is an obvious statement, but I don't think I've ever said it to you. I'm going to say it now. Confidence in flesh is considered by the world as an asset. Of course, it's an asset rather than a liability. Michael represents Saul as the Pharisee of the Pharisee, outwardly blameless, as we've been talking about in relation to law, but quick to condemn. That's it. Quick to condemn. Quick to condemn. Blameless as to the law, but a hair trigger, waiting for any little impropriety. This is what the Pharisees had against Christ. He's picking corn on the Sabbath. Caught you. The woman coming in to cry at Jesus' feet, opened the alabaster perfume. If Jesus had known what kind of woman this was, he would not have let her come in here and worship at his feet. It wasn't the right thing to do. Quick to condemn. Oh, quick to condemn. Because that's all they look at. That's all they notice. You know what happened with Michal? 2 Samuel 6:23. And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. God cursed her for not recognizing the beauty, the inward beauty of a man who was so thankful that he did not care how he looked in front of his own subjects. So in this sense, King David represents the converted Saul of Tarsus, becoming Paul. This is King David really becoming Paul, recognizing above all else that he was nothing, and God was everything. Saul, as a Pharisee, couldn't stand the sight of Gentiles, the scent of Gentiles. This guy winds up being the greatest champion of the Gentiles. He stays with them, he eats with them, he lives like a nomad. Things he would have disdained before. And see, that's the same thing with our Lord, the friend of tax gatherers, fishermen, and prostitutes. And here's Saul becoming friends with the Corinthians. He totally went away from his old world. Let's go back to David, because this guy's on a roll. He can't shut up. He further answers Michal in 2 Samuel 6:22. I will become even more dignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. Oh my gosh, this is so rich. Wow. Rather than caving to his wife's social sensitivities, David doubles down. I love this. I love doubling down. Do you think this is undignified? Me dancing in common garments, stripping off my priestly robes, no pomp, no ceremony, getting in the mix, kind of like a stage dive. David does a stage dive into his fan club, basically. You think this is undignified? Wait until you see what I'm going to do tomorrow. Ha ha! Listen to the pulpit commentary on this. These words have been variously interpreted, but their simplest meaning is also the best, that even the most uneducated women, though surprised at first at David's want of stateliness, would, on reflection, be led to a right understanding of the greatness of God, not of David, of God, and would then feel that even a king was right in owning himself to be nothing in God's presence. This is so great, because Saul, or King David, does this for the sake of the slave girls, for the sake of the common people. They would initially have been shocked, like, this is King David. What is he doing? And they would be forced to think about it. It's like, what's happening here? Upon reflection, they would be led to a right understanding of the greatness of God, because Michal wanted everybody to be reminded of the greatness of David. David, you are great, you're the king. We must constantly keep this in the mind of the people, that you are to be worshipped, you are to be looked at, you are to be envied and adored, and that makes me look good. David, I'm your wife, come on, help me out here. But David is for the people. He wants people to come to an understanding of God. And so in his honesty, he actually leads people to God, because upon reflection, they will see that, wow, even the king realizes that his attainments are not of himself, they're of God. And doesn't this speak of Christ? Oh, eloquently. It shocked the Pharisees, shocked them to see Jesus befriending the most unappreciated, uneducated, meanest members of Jewish society. Yet, these were the people who, when they understood that Jesus was the Son of God, when they beheld his humility, that made them come to a right understanding of the Father because of it. Because Jesus is the image of the Father. So they came to see Jesus as the Messiah, and this shocked them at first. Like, they thought the Messiah would be coming riding on a white horse, blowing the trumpet before him, dressed in all his royal garb, and yet he comes as a servant of the people. He comes dressed meek and lowly. My God, he enters Jerusalem on the foal of an ass. On an ass he enters Jerusalem, not on a white steed. This caused people to think, oh, wow, maybe God is like this. Yeah, maybe God is like that. God is like that because you are now looking at the image of God. And God is, we could think God is like sitting on his throne, blah, blah, blah. No, God is in the mix. This is why Paul calls him in Romans 16:25 the Aeonian God. He's showing us God involved with us in the realm of time. And this is what I believe. I believe that the greater you are, the more it behooves you to be merciful, to be loving, to be kind, to be humble. People who act all kingly and all high and mighty, these are posers, these are actors, these are wannabes. And so in order to prop up their own estimation of themselves, they have to become powerful in outward forms, because then the people will tremble at them, you see. And they need the people to tremble in order to feel better about themselves. This is all bullshit role playing. This is all fakery. This is all outside of the cup bullshit. It is just, and Jesus Christ, Saul of the Pharisee, King David, this is all an example of how a life well lived in the Spirit is. And the only way you can divest yourself of this false pomp, this pride, is to understand that everything you have is a gift of God. And Jesus Christ's humility, again, led people to a right understanding of the Father. And of course, the Pharisees and Michael, they would avoid the riffraff. Where did it get them? Yes, where did it get them? It got them to a place of hate. When you're posing, when you're dressing yourself up, trying to be something that you're not, like all Christianity is doing this. They're all doing this. They want to be seen going to the baptism. They want to be seen coming to church and coming out of church. They want to be seen. They want to be seen. They want to be seen doing right things. They're trumpeting themselves all the time. And they're quick, like Michael, quick to judge other people who aren't going their route. Well, why aren't you going to church like us? Why aren't you presenting yourself as we expect a pastor to present yourself? Where's your diploma? Where's your robe? Blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I'm stage diving into my fan club here. I'm stage diving into the people of whom I am one. That's the beauty. This whole thing of clergy. Organized religion has set this up in any religion, whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity. They set up this clergy system, this hierarchy system, this caste system where we're the clergy, you're the people. Got it? Good. We're the clergy, you're the people. What is this except self-righteousness and pride? And the Lord is the ultimate example. Jesus Christ became and remains the president of a club of fools, of a parliament of whores, a convocation of nobodies, all of whom will blast the Pharisees and the people like Michael out of existence as they enter God's kingdom an eon ahead of the religionists.